Welcome to the Greater Irvine Chamber Business Insights podcast series, where we address challenges and ideas for early-stage and entrepreneurial business leaders. Your host today is Dave Coffaro, Interim President and CEO of the Greater Irvine Chamber.
Well, welcome to the Greater Irvine Chamber Business Insight Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Coffaro, and today we're exploring a topic that's close to the hearts of every business leader, and that is crafting a narrative that connects with your audience. It helps you build trust and sets you apart in a very crowded marketplace. So we all know that facts and figures and features and things like that, they can only go so far. It's really the story behind the numbers, the human element that captures attention and creates an emotional engagement with a business or any type of organization that really makes the difference. And in today's competitive landscape, mastering the art of storytelling isn't just a nice to have, it's truly a need to have. It's essential. Our guest today is Carrie Freitas. She is founder and CEO of Kitchen Table Marketing and an expert in business storytelling. And she's helped businesses of all sizes communicate their vision, their values in compelling ways. So whether you're just starting out and exploring this idea of the art of storytelling, or you're looking to take your business to the next level, this episode is packed with ideas for you, so you will not want to miss a second of it. So let's get started with our conversation about the power of storytelling to elevate your personal brand. Carrie, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Dave. You're thanking me, but this is a great opportunity, and I love talking about this topic. So I appreciate
know you do. That's why I'm so glad that you're with us. So for starters, would you share a little bit about your background and the work that you do today?
Yes. So I'm an OC native, and originally wanted to be a broadcast journalist. A lot of us PR folks are either wannabe or I don't know, frustrated journalists, let's say. So that's where the storytelling comes in. My experience in PR after I abandoned and got kind of chickened out of doing broadcast journalism because of the just the story arc that you'd have to create, working in small towns, working your way up. When you're born and raised in Newport Beach, it's kind of hard to think about yourself in Poughkeepsie or, Billings,
Right.
Montana, right?
Right.
So, so it's the hazard of living here, but it's a great one to have to navigate. So, I started in PR at big agencies in San Francisco and LA, and it was just a blast. So working on PR and marketing and branding for big companies, Pizza Hut, Nintendo introduced Pokemon to the US with that team. Target stores launch in the West Coast region. I got to work on, Microsoft for the video game industry, Rice-A-Roni, which, you can't live in San Francisco and as a PR person not want to work on Rice-A-Roni. So cut my teeth on really big accounts with big budgets, but a lot of big learning and big lessons as far as the storytelling vis-a-vis whether it's media relations, the PR side, or whether it's in the marketing advertising side, or whether, it's on the branding side and the logo development and, the story around like maybe a line extension for Pepsi, like a new beverage, right, within their Pepsi, brand. So that was a great place to learn storytelling. And then came back to Orange County to have and raise a family. And that's when I started applying not these budgets, because that would be unrealistic, but the tenets of storytelling, PR, and branding and marketing to small to mid-sized clients. That's how Kitchen Table Marketing and PR was born here in the OC, and have worked with and continue to work with so many different types of clients, a lot of nonprofits. First, obviously, storytelling, branding, marketing, fundraising, et cetera. And then also the for-profits. So we work with a lot of shopping centers. We work with restaurants. We work with Johnson & Johnson MedTech, doing the lighter side for them, community relations and attracting new employees to their, best-in-class business. So Orange County is a great place to live and work, as you all know. And we have a lot of fun applying these kind of big box, big idea principles to small to mid-sized businesses, even sole proprietors, startups. so that they get the benefit of this expertise without the price tag, is what we like to say.
So our audience is fortunate because they're getting your tremendous background and distilled into ideas that are actionable for them, which is a perfect place for us to dive into the basics. So how would you define a personal brand, and how does storytelling intersect with brand?
I would argue that storytelling and branding are semantically, they sound different, but they're really the same practice. So when you're developing anything around your brand, whether it's the name of your company, or choosing whether it's going to be, like eponymous, like it's going to be your name on the door or some other name, when you're looking at your logo and what it's going to look like, when you're looking at, how you communicate to your audience, constituencies, whatever they may be, depending on your practice, I would argue that your brand and the storytelling are the same thing. That your brand is the story that you tell. It's the embodiment of that story. So it can look, a lot of people just think of branding as a visual look. Like my branding is my logo and my color palette. Yes and no, right? So that's part of it. But really, all of it goes back. Storytelling is like the bigger idea, and the brand, I think, falls below that umbrella, if that makes sense. So for your personal brand, it's the story you tell about yourself. We all tell so many stories about ourselves, right? So this is the one that you can't towards business, right? So how do you talk about yourself? How do you want to show up in the business community? And that takes a lot of different forms. It does take the form of a logo. It does take the form of a business name, whether it's an LLC or an S Corp or just a DBA. It does take the form of color palette. But more importantly, that all has to march back and sync up with the story of you and your practice. And I think you made a really one of several apt comments in your opener about how to set yourself apart in a crowded marketplace. And I think that it can seem daunting, and we're going to talk about how to do it. But I think that just to apply a level of comfort here for everybody, you're the only you. You are the only you that does things the way you do. You may work in a crowded marketplace of insurance services or real estate. However, no one does it exactly like you do. And there's something different and special about how you do it if you're successful, which I know your viewers and listeners are. That is a story. So everyone has a story, and everyone has a powerful story. It's just a matter of distilling, as you said, down to that story. And that's the work.
So, Carrie, as you're talking through it, one of the thoughts going through my mind, I think about our members, our community, and I would imagine for a lot of us, that isn't sort of the natural thing we focus on. We're trained and we develop an expertise. Look at how many innovators we've got here who invented something, they created something, and just really aren't accustomed to having to think, now I've got to tell a story about me. I mean, that may feel awkward and all that.
Yes.
So what are some of the key elements that go into creating a personal brand story?
That's a great question, Dave. And I understand what you're saying because certainly, we're not really taught to talk story, if you will, in our culture, and especially in business culture, unless you're on my side of the desk, right? And that's what I'm in the business of. So you start with, just like a company would, or a nonprofit, you start with a mission and vision and value statements, right? And that's not where you're going to end up, because that can be very dry and not super compelling to your audience. But you need to start with, that's the scaffolding, right? So we need the foundation and the scaffolding. So I would ask your, the chamber members and listeners to think about, what are your values in business? Hopefully, and this is a whole nother podcast, they're aligned with your personal values, right? Because that's what really makes your work sing, right? But what are your values? Are you 100% committed to the customer experience being exceptional? Is innovation a value? Is accessibility, inclusion, affordability a value? Is expertise a value? And what does that convey and deliver? So it's really sitting down with yourself and saying, what are my values in business? And how do I want someone to perceive me when I walk in the room. And the answers are all across the board. So it doesn't have to be, not everyone has to have a value of charisma, right? Because in some cases, it may or may not be appropriate, and it may or may not be in alignment with who they are. So, for example, when I think of like my values for my company, I would say, we are very passionate about the work we do. We are incredibly responsive. We really have to be in alignment with our clients and everyone we work with on a value system of inclusion, compassion, kindness, and impact. So, that's not going to be someone else's. I mean, if you're in semiconductor, that may not be something that you are leading with, right? So you think about your personal values and how you want to show up in business, and that's the foundation for where you start, right? Your brand promise and, like you said, the offerings and the services and that whole piece, that follows later. That's not even part of the ground up storytelling. So it really starts with your values, your mission. What are you trying to do in business? What do you want your impact and legacy to be? And that may feel awkward because you may feel maybe there's imposter syndrome. Like, well, I'm just selling residential real estate, which we know down here is very challenging because it is a crowded market and it's a complex market. But you're not just selling residential real estate. Are you making people's dreams come true? Are you, providing safe shelter for a family to grow? Are you delivering an asset to your client that will continue to grow and ensure their kids, future from a fiscal standpoint? So it's like you're not just transacting. What's the bigger picture for you, and why do you do it? So that's where you start. It's really mission, your vision for what you're trying to do in the world of business, and your values, and coming up through that exercise with some buzzwords that feel like you. So if passion's one of them, or if, I always like to cite Charles Antis and Antis Roofing and Waterproofing because, at the end of the day, they're putting roofs on houses, right? But as we've seen his story unfold, we all know that it's way more layered and there's way more purpose to it. So I would ask you to look at that when you're thinking about, he's got superheroes on the side of his trucks. He keeps families safe and dry. It's not just putting a roof on. So I would ask you to dig a little deeper. It doesn't have to have a social, social enterprise purpose necessarily, but it does have to reflect why you're in this business, why it matters to you, and why you get up every day and do what you do. So you'll end up with maybe a mission statement that's a short sentence about why you do what you do. And you'll end up with a list of, I'm hoping, 8 to 10 words that you feel describes what you and your business do. Don't worry too much about editing it to make sure you're different than everyone else. Just get it down on paper and sit with it for a while and see if it, after a week or two or more, it still resonates with you. That's the beginning.
And what a fabulous foundation. There's so much there. One of the things that comes out of what you just described, Carrie, for me is how important it is to define the way you want to be seen. You use those words, how you want to be seen. And I know in myself and with other people, we don't always preemptively, proactively define the way we want to be seen, right? We just sort of say, well, I'm a this or I'm a that, I'm a realtor or it kind of reminds me, I had an experience in my own consulting practice working with a group of portfolio managers. And it was a strategic planning project, but the conversation was around, there were about 30 of these people in this meeting. And so I said, tell me about, as we're thinking about positioning your company, tell me about what you do. First person got up, she says, I'm a portfolio manager, I'm a money manager. Next person gets up, he says, I'm a money manager. The next person gets up and says, I'm a money manager. And I said, stop.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. What am I going to get if I choose you? What am I going to experience?
Yes.
And so what I hear you saying is it's entirely up to us to define, to design, to intentionally, mindfully lay that foundation out, to use your word, preemptively. And I love that idea because if we don't define it ourselves, someone will define it for us, and it may not be the definition that we want, right?
100%, Dave. And I think I really appreciate you using the words intentional, mindful. Um, you know, again, maybe I don't think these words are woo woo. I think these words are like how we need to live and relate as humans. So I'm just going to freely use them. I feel like every interaction that I have is intentional nowadays when I'm at my best self. If I'm feeling reactive or anxious, maybe I don't show up that way and the way I want to, but I would challenge your members and listeners and viewers to be really intentional about this process, right? And that includes not only this branding process, but how they walk into any room. What do you want? How do you want to be perceived? How do you want to show up from an energetic standpoint? Or, do you want to be a connector? Do you want to be a leader? And these are not mutually exclusive, but, do you want to be someone that is an expert? Do you want to be more of a listener, an observer? And how does that play back to your brand? I mean, I think if I'm a portfolio manager, like these clients of yours were, and wealth and money managers, I better be an expert, but I also better be a good listener because I need to hear what my client's goals are and make sure I'm not just, kind of going after the brass ring that's in my mind and not theirs, right?
Right.
If
Right.
I'm a real estate agent, same thing. So I feel like it is about how you want to be perceived. And this, I don't want this to sound like Orwellian, like you're it's not manipulative to have a brand and a persona. It's actually helpful because you're kind of telling people who you are, what you do, and how you do it through the way you show up and the words that you use. And then that way, it's such a shorthand for people. They can say, you know what, Dave's a really good match for me on the consulting front. Or, you know what, I like the way Carrie talks about marketing because it seems really humanistic, and I like that. That makes me feel good about that. That's in alignment with my brand, that is maybe a therapy practice or something. So
Right. Right.
you're really helping yourself, but helping others know how to perceive and work with you. So I
Yeah.
find it to be a great connector.
I also can see where, with all the noise around us, that when we make it easier for people to digest, right, to process and sift through the noise and say, yeah, that resonates with me. I can see why I'd want to do business with this company or this person, how that would resonate. There's another part of this though that I want to ask you about. So when it comes to telling our personal brand story, how do we make sure that it's authentic instead of sales pitchy? Because I can see there's a balancing act there. It's got to
Yes.
be real, but you don't want it to be just like a pitch.
Right. Yes. I mean, I think from a marketing psychology, um, people don't want to be pitched. I mean, and I'm sure that you've experienced, maybe like a hard sell, obviously in your life, it's at different points of your life. And, that used to be okay. In the early days of Mad Men. And my dad was one of those Madison Avenue guys, right? So that was kind of the old way. Or, sorry, Dad, but true. And the way that people want to relate nowadays is really more interpersonal. We are hungry for, especially even more so post-pandemic, true connection, true authenticity. We're ready for transparency because we know when we're being sold, we're very sophisticated consumers. I mean, we've got all these social channels where we're being sold. We've got all these, broadcast, other media channels where we're being sold. So we just want to connect and know someone's being, authentic. So the way to do that, it all ties back to who are you? Like if you're a real hard pitch salesperson at your core, I mean, I would say maybe you should temper it a bit. But I mean, if that's who you are, I kind of say go with that because that is your personality. However, when we're looking at the most recent studies and best practices, it's more about showing up as you, and your business is secondary. So the first thing to do is connect with people as people. The business follows, right? So the way you talk about yourself should be very authentic. It's tempting to, once again, going back to the Annis roofing for a second, because everyone's familiar with Charles and that business, or most people are in Irvine. It would be easy if I had a roofing company to try to want to mimic what he's done because it has been very successful, right? However, I believe there's only, and I'm an abundance mindset person, but still, I think there's only room in this market for one superhero, keeping families warm and dry, play, right? And he's got that play. So how else can I show up as a roofer that, is meaningful in my way, right? Because that's his path. So it's tempting to mimic other successful people. I definitely think you can learn lessons, but I think you're your own person. So you need to show up differently. There are a lot of bigger PR agencies than mine here in town, um, all of whom I respect. They're leaders in their teams. But it wouldn't make sense for me to show up as a big corporate agency when I view myself as a little bit more of a firebrand and a little less constrained than that. Like I feel like because I have a small nimble, I'm like a small nimble ship that can pilot these like tiny channels and really surgically address things. I'm not like a big Titanic, which may have a lot of advantages to it for certain clients, but I wouldn't want to show up as bigger than I am because that's not my game. My game is we're small and nimble, get to know me, get to know us, we're scrappy, we'll do it. So I want to mimic my competitors because that wouldn't make sense. And it's also not true to me. And I think that as long as you are telling your true story and you're speaking from your values, that will set you apart. So just be careful of mimicking. As you mentioned, don't lead with the sale. Lead with the connection. So lead with, hi, I'm Carrie Freitas, and I do happen to like own and operate. And I never lead with this, but I own and operate a PR marketing agency. But I'm like, tell me about your business. Tell me about what it's like to be in that business in this time. Tell me about I know it's really hard right now for nonprofits to raise money because it's been just because of the economy. How are you addressing that? Like, I get curious and get in conversation, and then the sale kind of happens like down the pipeline. It's like it's not upstream. The sale kind of happens downstream. This is, sales 101, which I know is not my topic, but it's really about your personal brand is you leading with you and your story, not necessarily directly related to your service offerings. If you're an innovator that came up with some kind of new technology, you could talk to someone about how, what lights you up is really like, thinking outside the box and applying learnings from all sorts of different disciplines that seem kind of maybe unrelated, but they come together in some kind of innovation. You could be like, and then you ask the person you're with, what lights you up? I ask that to a lot of people when I'm with them, and they're like a little taken aback, but they love talking about it. And sometimes they don't know the answer, and that leads them on an exploration, which I think is cool too. I hope that answered your question in a very long form.
It does, because I think that curiosity, being interested in your customers, your clients, learning about them, and then seeing if there's an alignment with your story, with your brand, and then using that background, the foundation, again, back to what you said, to see how well you fit with that customer, client, prospect. That makes a lot of sense. So you've mentioned Charles Antis and the superhero positioning, and anyone who drives the 55 sees Charles trucks and the superheroes there. Would you share some other examples of storytelling techniques that work well in shaping a personal brand?
Yes. So I was thinking about this the last night in relation to politics, but it applies to business too. And that is, I was thinking actually, and this will be, I think it will lead into business. I was thinking about a gentleman who's running for a city council seat here in Orange County. And he's new to the scene. He's younger. And no one knows his story. And he has a great story, right? But he hasn't done anything to like plant the seeds for that story. So he's coming to you kind of like as an unknown quantity, right? And so I think this is a cautionary tale of, that you need to storytell before you sell. And he hasn't done that. And I am, even though he seems like a worthy candidate, I don't think he has a snowball's chance because no one knows his story. So there's no storytelling, ergo there's going to be no selling. So I feel that the storytelling that can happen for a personal brand can be, let's say that I've met so many great people at your chamber events, and at a speaking event I did, and they have the leads groups, right? So let's say that I'm an attorney, and I am in family law, and that's a crowded field. It feels very generalist as well. So my storytelling should be, I think, when I'm thinking about that practice, and I think about having to avail myself of a family lawyer at one point, what I was looking for and what I think a lot of clients are looking for is someone that's very warm, non-threatening, um, able to explain complex legal concepts in a clear way, especially because when you're usually going to a lawyer, very stressed out. So you may not be firing on all cylinders, right? Someone that's really got your back, that's going to be protecting you, advocating for you, but really is relational and understands you. So I think the storytelling for that person on their website and on their social media with content and photos, all the photos would need to be approachable. I don't want to see a like hard-boiled litigator pose from this person. I don't want to see like, you know what I mean? I want to see this person at their desk with body language that's welcoming me in, right? So it starts even visually. I want to see their blog and their website have language that talks about these key tenets I just shared with you. Warm, approachable, protector, has your best interest at heart. Yes, they're expert. You need to know that. But the more important things are you're going to navigate me through a really difficult season, and I trust you because you seem very approachable and like someone I can trust. So it's the photos, it's the content on the website. It's also, and in social media, it's also like maybe some op-ed articles on how, you know, during difficult, seasons, lawyers are more than just, hard-edged litigators. They become trusted advisors, and how an attorney can not only support you on the legal front, but give you referrals on other fronts that you may need support-wise. Maybe they do a collaboration with a therapist on a podcast talking about like the key mental health issues around, when you're coming to a family lawyer. Is that divorce? Is it, maybe not estate, but, other issues around family law. This person, I think, from a storytelling perspective, should be volunteering in the community with organizations that are family oriented, showing that they have this caring heart and compassion, right? It doesn't have to be directly in a legal way, but maybe they should be volunteering as a big brother, big sister. Maybe they should be at the Boys and Girls Clubs, so I feel like that to me is storytelling. So it's something that's in, it's on the channels you control, like maybe a podcast, a blog, your website. It's got to be visual and obviously, the prosaic, the words that you use, but also showing up in the right spaces. And I think, maybe they work, obviously with women's groups, right? They need to show up at maybe junior league and be part of that, so there's networking, but it's also storytelling because the places where you see me tell you a story about me. If you follow my LinkedIn, you'll notice that you'll see me in spaces that are nonprofit related, and I'm a big advocate. You'll see me in spaces that are media related because I'm a big advocate for local journalists to get paid well and compensated because they're just gold for our democracy. So you'll see me showing up in spaces, and that tells you a story about me. It's what I care about. So that's, I think, that's a theoretical example, but I think a good example of how all these different media channels and activities come together to tell a story about you.
The way you just described that, Carrie, it sounds like we're crafting a movie script. We're the one who is playing the lead. I'm playing the lead in the script.
Main character energy.
That's what it sounded like. At least that's the way it landed on me. So I'm going to ask if you would kind of contextualize all that great content you just shared in that example and just sort of contextualize it in process. So the question is, where should someone start to bring storytelling into their personal brand today?
Right. So refer back to 10 minutes ago in the conversation where we talked about coming up with your mission and your values, right? So you want all those buzzwords. So that's your foundation. Then you're going to build on that. So you're going to say, okay, you're going to run it by some people. So you're going to run it by people with whom you work, people that refer you, people that you collaborate with, your family, and say, which of these things, if you were looking at it, do like your own little focus group, which really resonate with you? Like, how do I show up? And then they'll give you that great insight, right? So then you'll boil it down to, probably like 4 kind of key principles that represent you in your practice, right? They could be, integrity is a big one. It's an important one, but it's also a little amorphous. So you might want to boil that down to, whether it's honest, whether it's transparent, something a little more immediate. I think. A lot of these big words that you'll see like on an inspirational poster with an eagle flying above a beautiful mountain, those may be too, I don't know, trite. So you may want to really boil it down to plain speak. I'm a tell it like it is person. So I have integrity, but I boil it down to like, I will always speak truth to you, even if it hurts, because I'm the truth teller. So you'll know where you stand and what's realistic, what I can deliver, because I'll never hide that from you. Right. So boil it down to like 4 really like plain spoken ideas that represent you in your practice. And then from there, think about so that's how I want to show up. So I want to be mindful that when I walk into a room that that people would, after they meet me, that if someone were to come to them and say, hey, we're just doing a quick exit survey, post event survey on Carrie. Would these 4 words describe her and the way she interacted with you? Just mindfully show up, planning to, you don't have to say those words out loud, but be those words, right? Then I want you to think about, how can I make those words come to life in my practice? So if I say that, I'm always going to tell you the truth, I'm a truth teller, and I'm going to always be super transparent with you, I want my website language and the way I interact with my clients to always reflect that. So when I look at my language on my website, I don't want a bunch of complex, 50-cent words when like a penny word will do. I want it to be very plain spoken and upfront, and also communicate literally that I will always tell you the truth, even when it hurts. Maybe I will think about not only just my website, but my social media. So for me on LinkedIn, I'm known as, I also think, a pretty authentic, transparent person that will say things that other people aren't comfortable saying. And I think that's really important, because in what I do, I need to let clients know what's possible and what's not based on my expertise. I also need to be trusted by media to never do all this baiting and switching and smoke and mirrors. I have to give them the real story, and I can't hide stuff from the media. If there's a skeleton in my client's closet, that's dishonest. 1, I don't want to represent them, but 2, like I have to share that with the media. Say, hey, this is the story. You're going to see something, from 2 years ago about this. Let me tell you what that is. So I think on my LinkedIn, my posts are the same way. I kind of open the door and just say, here's a real like situation. And this is, something I was thinking about a post I want to do about firing clients. A lot of people would never post something like that. But I think it's important to talk about when it's in the interest of your team and the client and you and your business to let them go, part ways. And a lot of people would be like, that's scary. I don't want to, but that's part of my persona. So when I'm thinking about my brand, you've got your 4 keywords, you've got kind of like how you want to show up in the world, you've got what your bigger purpose is, right? It's of course to make money and support yourself or your family. I mean, we get that. We're all here to, make a living, but like, hopefully you have a bigger purpose that gets you out of bed in the morning, right? So everything ties back to the 4 key tenets, your bigger purpose, and then make sure that comes through in how you show up. I think about LinkedIn. I really feel like LinkedIn is a very important place if you're doing any social media. If you're business to business, it's a really important place to show up. If you're a hairstylist, I would argue that that's probably not your place, although you'd be the only hairstylist on LinkedIn. So maybe you should think about it. It sounds like a really cool out of the box idea, but you should be on Instagram, right? And in your LinkedIn post, let yourself come through. So think about some topics that really light you up about what you do, right? And storytell around those. If I am a real estate agent and I helped this family get into a house with these rates, sky high, and it took forever, but the journey was successful, and how you navigated it, I would probably do a little story, a vignette on it and on my LinkedIn, and show how, and bring it to life. Just say, I met, James and Jessica, and they were looking for a house, and there was like nothing available, and the rates were so high, and we didn't know how we were going to make it, but we collaborated with such and such mortgage broker who, has these great contacts, and it took months, and we had unsuccessful offers, but finally, through all that, we made it through, and here's a picture of them in front of their house. And it's like, that tells me a story about you. 1 is you're dogged and persistent. 2, you have great connections to make deals happen. 3, you really stand for your clients, and you're not going to get frustrated and just implode because the deal's not coming together and you're not making money for every, hour you're working. and for that you care about that family, and maybe you're in the picture like hugging them, and that tells me something about you. You're not just transactional, you're relational. So think about that in your LinkedIn and your socials, like I said, on your website, and then show up, like I'm saying, in the spaces that you want to be seen. So at the leads meetings, at, the Greater Irvine Chamber, at all the mixers, but also show up, doing some work that you love in the nonprofit sector, that aligns with your values. It doesn't have to align directly with your work, but your values. And then you could do a post on, I may work in waste management, but, and I know it's not all glamorous, but, my heart really is in, maybe it's like you're doing like a beach cleanup, and just say, this is another way that I think about like my role in this community is like bringing awareness to this. Or you may just work at the Pacific Marine Mammal Center as a volunteer and just say, my bigger why for being in waste management is to help keep our environment healthy. And one of the things I do is help sea lions because they're being affected and impacted by, negative environmental factors. So, I mean, it's like you said, so you get to build the story around yourself, but start with the key principles and the mission statement, and then build on it. Maybe just start with LinkedIn. Play there,
You laid that out so nicely. There is so much there. Let's wrap this up with one more question.
Okay.
Just to take all this great content that you've shared and distill it down to this one question. What one piece of advice would you give someone who's kind of struggling to find or to define their personal brand?
I would say outsource it. So not necessarily to me, but I'm saying to a trusted friend or loved one. Just say, I'm really struggling to figure out like how what I'm doing is different. I don't want to focus on products and services. Like, how do you see me? Like, how do you, if you strip away like the what of what I do, tell me about like the how and why that you perceive. And so outsource it that way. Because other people tend to see us a lot more accurately than we'll see ourselves. And I think that's a great place to start.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I love that idea. Yes, I always believe that we get the best input, especially from people close to us who can say, here's what I really see, and maybe it looks different, but what great counsel. Thank you so much, Carrie. Appreciate your expertise, your insights. And folks, thank you so much for listening. If you want to find out more information about Carrie, there's a link in our podcast, and you can get more information about her and her business. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for joining us for the Greater Irvine Chamber Business Insights podcast. To stay informed about upcoming podcasts and other important business news, please subscribe to our channel or check the Greater Irvine Chamber website.